welcome to the People's Matter show. Today we have a very influential personality in the real estate world, and now he's also part of the property management world. He's my good friend. He's also a mover and shaker in real estate for many years. He's a CPA, he's a family man. How are you, Andrew?
Gal, I'm doing great. So happy to be on the show with you today. Thank you for that introduction. And you're a great friend of mine, too. And love to have a great conversation with you today, buddy.
Well, let me, for everyone that might not know about Andrew, but when I say that he is an icon in the real estate industry, I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. He was for many years, I think it was over 20 years, the CFO for one of the biggest real estate companies in the US, which is Realogy Franchise Group, which today is Anywhere. They changed the name, but he was the CFO and managed over 100 people in his area. He also renewed millions of dollars in contracts for real estate franchises. He also helped in the acquisition of real estate brands like Sotheby's. He also was part and orchestrated a magnificent job to increase return on investment for the company for many years. And most of all, Drew, and that's how I call him, Drew, he was part of the negotiations for brands, real estate franchisors, which was part of the great success of one of the biggest companies, real estate companies in America. But today, in the last 4 years, he changed his role and now he is the COO for one of the biggest property management companies, which is Home River Group. Today, our show is about people, but why does a CFO or a COO is important when we talk about people is because you make things happen and people have to know what is exactly behind the scenes when things are going sideways. For example, in 2007, 2008, you were there, you rebuilt the industry in the real estate world. But anyways, I'm going to stop there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, which is an amazing career for the last 30 years, and especially if we can start by just telling us a little bit more about those times when it was tough, 2007, 2008, and manage your team and rebuild brands and renegotiate. Tell us a little bit about that part of your story.
Yeah, that's great, Miguel. Thank you so much. So, when you think about where I'm at today and how I got there, it starts with something that's very basic. It started with my family. My upbringing, my family meant a lot to me, my mom and dad, and they helped guide me to get to where I am today. So I can't thank them enough for all the things that happened in my life. But it's real. What helped really helped me do was to build my understanding of people and how to act ethically in all the right situations and not drop that ever. And a lot of things that we just talked about here, going back to the Realogy days and Sendent days, and now here at Home River Group, are about knowing and understanding your people, what they need, and helping to empower them to do their jobs. Because I can't be there to answer all their questions 24/7. I need to have the right people working for me who I can trust, empower them to do their jobs, and hold them accountable for doing those things. And a lot of that is really hiring the right people onto your team and moving that forward. In 2007, 8, 9, 10, when real estate was definitely going through the doldrums due to the Great Recession, it was about having all the right people around me to help execute on the plans that we needed to, whether it was renewing companies in a very, very bad time for real estate brokers or working with some of the top real estate companies in our portfolio who are struggling economically. Sometimes you need to work with them in advance to help them understand the risk, and they don't understand it until it's too late and they're picking up the phone saying, hey, those things that you said may have come to fruition didn't come to fruition. Can you come back and help us? And the first thing we did, myself and my team, get back on the phone with those people who now were in desperate need of help and help them work through things and help them survive the really bad times in real estate. And, quite frankly, I still have a relationship with a lot of those brokers because it wasn't just a job, but it's a very personal relationship at that time, and helping them get through one of the worst financial difficulties they've ever encountered in their life and got them back on the track to where they want to be long term. But it's a two-way street, right? You have to have that communication between yourself and then your business partner, or yourself and your team. And when you build out the right teams, you can trust them to do what you need to do 24/7. They need guidance. That's what your job is as a leader, and that's what you have to do and bring to the table.
Drew, going through 2007, 2008, I think that it's easy to talk about it today. Those were tough times, but when you're managing teams of people and you are negotiating contracts and you are basically just giving bad news to everyone, how do you inspire other people? How do you manage people to keep going when everything is falling apart?
Yeah, it's a combination of two things, Miguel. Number one is you've got to have the right people on your team. And unfortunately, during that period of time, we had to reduce staff in some areas, which is always a hard thing to do. And I take that very personally when we have to reduce staff. And it's not, somebody said to me, well, that's just part of your job. And I'm like, yes, that's part of the job, but it's not how I am as a person. That's not how I look at things. That's not how I view things. And some of that actually is seen very directly by my team of how personally I had to take letting go people during those tough times because of the financial impact to the rest of the company. And unfortunately, at times like that, you have to reduce your staff, but you also have to keep the right staff on team and keep them motivated. And part of that is putting out there what is our goals, what is the vision of the company, and how are we going to achieve that vision to get to where we need to be. And if you can get everybody on the team to buy into that, and we did a great job at that back in the Realogy days, people buy into what we're trying to do, how we make customers more successful, how we make real estate brokers, because a lot of them at that time weren't able to feed their families. They were not making an income. There was a lot fewer transactions than 3 or 4 years ago. So it's really motivating the team to see the vision and working with them, not just to dictate what they need to do, but empower them to do what they want to do and need to do to make sure we're hitting our vision as a company. So when you step back and you look at it and you say, what are we doing? It's like, we're doing what we need to do to save our franchisees. That was the vision. Make sure our franchisees are better with us than without us. And as you go through that, the people on your team start thinking different ways about how do we do this? How do we become successful as a team? And they come up with different ideas to motivate and run things versus what we're doing today when it's a much easier, better environment to work in. During those tough times is where the cream rises to the top all the time. And what I like to say to people today, more so than even in the past, is hey, if we got a challenge, I want you to think about the challenge. I want you to come back to me with 3 different ways that we can tackle this challenge. And then let's have a conversation about the potential solution that you think is best. And I'll test you on those things. And what that does is it motivates people to want to do their job better, and become leaders of an organization. Or if you're further down in the organization, helps people see the longer term vision of what we're doing. Because what we really want to do as a leader is help grow and promote people, not just at work, but in life. The more we can grow and promote people, the better I feel about that long term, right? Paycheck's great. We all love getting paid to do what we do. But if you can help somebody understand what they're doing and how that affects customers and how it affects the company, it's really impactful to them on a personal level as well. And that's why over time, I've kept a lot of my connections with people who worked for me, or people I worked with, or people I work for, because I try to make sure that that connection is there long term, because I'm trying to help people grow their careers and their lives.
Right. Well, let me ask you, as you are working with talent, with smart people. What was your philosophy throughout this year? Build within or hire outside and find for the best talent. Is it build within or find outside? What's been your principle for growing your teams?
Yeah. So when you're going through the process, you want to hire the right person, and you want to hire that person who can grow within the organization. I worked with a very good HR person at my last company. I'll leave her name out of it for the time being, but we both know who she is very personally. But working with her to find the right people to put in the right seats that you want to have grow their careers with you long term. I'm not a big fan of people coming in for a year or two and trying to grow their career based on us and move on to another thing, because I want them to grow their career long term with us. That's why we're hiring them. Now, that being said, some people move through that process quicker and we don't have those opportunities for them. So that does happen over time. But you really want to bring those people into the fold who you can mentor along, help see the bigger picture, help grow their careers, and give them the ability to really execute on what they need to do very quickly. And sometimes they don't see that vision coming right out, Miguel. And you're sitting with them and they're very frustrated and they don't understand it. And then if you can get that light to switch to turn on, they look back at it and go, I didn't understand where you're going. We had that conversation on this day at this place at this time. And it turned my opinion not only about you, about what I can do and how I can grow myself, help the company grow, and help add value long term. And that's really special because those are the people I can reach back in my life and just say hi, see how you're doing, and we can chat about the great times we have. But I can also chat about them with what are they doing, what are they trying to achieve, and help them with their lives on a longer term basis. Because again, the paycheck's great, but looking forward and knowing that you've helped a lot of people throughout their careers is really special.
So let's talk about the real estate world for a minute, and then we'll move into property management, where you are now.
Sounds
Uh,
great.
what advice would you give those brokers and those entrepreneurs, real estate entrepreneurs out there that are trying to go to the next level or that they're trying to grow their business, and especially at the time that they need to hire talent? What type of advice would you give them? Especially you work with so many brokers out there. What advice would you give them?
Well, that's a great question. With what's changed in the real estate industry in the last 2 to 3 years after the pandemic, the ramp up of real estate buys in 21 and going into 22, and a significant cutoff beginning in middle of 22 through now, which I think is going to go on for another 6, 12, 18 months based on what I see, based on what the pundits are saying. It's what is your plan, right? What is your plan? What is your strategic plan to get from where you're at today to where you want to be? Is it just continue to clip the coupons and do the small things, or do you want to really have a plan where you want to double or triple or quadruple your size of your business?
Right.
And if you execute upon your plan, you should be successful. But when you're executing on your plan, to use a Yogi Berra, he's one of my favorite ball players, is when you come to the fork in the road, take it. Sometimes you've got to reevaluate what you're doing, understand what the long term opportunities are, and then make a business decision saying, okay, the lawsuit that came down, that's going to change the future of real estate. How do I want to tackle this problem going forward? Am I just going to bury my head in the sand, which some people will do and not be very successful? Other people are going to sit back and look at this and say, where do we go from here? What are the things I should be thinking about as a real estate person to help buyers and sellers in this new world that has been recently created? And as people step back and they start to think about those things, they should be thinking not only about the next 3 to 6 months, but about the next 2 to 3 years. Because I still think this hasn't settled yet, so to speak. Although there's a lot of the litigation has settled, I think people are still trying to figure out exactly what they want to do, how they want to do it, and what their long term plans are. I think there's a really great opportunities for all the size companies, small, medium, and large in the space, and different people need to tackle the problems differently. And that's one of the big challenges I think they all have to recognize is what are the challenges of the big company versus little companies? Am I just in this to make a paycheck, or am I looking to do something and grow to a medium sized company and grow my net worth longer term? And
Yeah.
those are things that are very personal. That I think if you sit back and you think about it as a real estate person, you got to think about where am I going and what are those things that we need to do.
Drew, so true. Now, real estate has ups and downs. In the last few years, the real estate industry is being down. We all know why. When interest rates go up, normally people don't want to buy, especially when you used to see 2%, 3% interest rates, and now you go to 6, 7%. Now, what is your best advice for those entrepreneurs, either real estate or any type of entrepreneur out there, on these ups and downs that industries have? What would you do when the industry is at a lower level? What advice would you give them?
It's a great question, Miguel. But I think the short answer is who is your customer, right? Is your customer the big guy who's buying the 500, 600, $7,000 house? Or is it the first time home buyer or that first time move up buyer? I think you kind of have to be selective because the market's been changing a lot lately. And if you think about what we've been through in real estate for the last 15 years, and this is some of the things that we talk about as a company today, we talk about it with our board, we talk about it with our senior leadership team, is real estate functionally changed back in 2007 and 8 when the big crash came. A lot of people bought homes and now are using them as rental properties. A lot of people were able to solidify their and then start to think about, well, I got a really low interest rates coming out of the Great Recession. Let me just, hunker down for a couple more years and see if I can get through this. And then I'll think about, growing my net worth or moving down the road. I think what wound up happening is people retain those long term cheap interest rates, and what they started to do was think about, okay, well maybe I'll just continue to pay down my mortgage. Maybe I'll just add an in-law suite. Maybe I'll add another room for my son and his wife and his child and things of that nature. So things have fundamentally changed. I think there is an opportunity coming down the road here. I just don't know if it's 6 months or 12 months down the road where moms and dads start to fund down payments for their children where they can. And I think that's going to free things up again. So as I look at this, I talk to other people in the real estate industry. That generational wealth change that is going to happen here sooner than later is really going to impact the way people can buy homes. It kind of fades into where I'm at today. So I went from residential resales into residential property management because one of the trends that we saw back in 13, 14, and 15 was the owners, the future owners of homes who were millennials, Gen Z folks. They're not going to be able to buy a home like you and I were able to buy homes with amount of money we needed for down payment, the amount of money we need to furnish a home, the amount of money that's out there. There was a lot of money that goes into buying a home. What they have actually been able to do was they've moved into multifamily housing where they've started to gain some wealth. Then they move into single family rentals where they gain some more wealth, potentially then with a significant other. Maybe they start a family there. And then they have enough equity built up that they can put a down payment down on the house and eventually go into that. So I think there's going to be a lot more opportunities for those first time home buyers. But in the markets that you live in and I live in, it's a challenge just because the valuations of the homes are so high, and getting that big down payment is a challenge. And I think this is some of the stuff that the industry really has to think through with the mortgage industry and say, okay, how do we get rid of this gridlock, which used to be everybody moves every 7 years, everybody moves every 10, 11, 12, 13 years, because people are stagnating in those homes. And we kind of have to break that. We've got to give people the opportunity to go out there and figure out how to do things. And that's why I think if you think about it from the first time home buyer or the move up buyers, there's going to be a lot of opportunity down the road there. And that's how I'm kind of looking at things down the road.
Yeah, I think, like you said at the beginning, to focus in a specific niche, specific segments, I think is the key, especially now that it's a tough market. But the better that you are in that specific niche, the better results that you're going to have in the long term. So as you are moving from real estate to property management, and what has been the most challenge for you from going from the biggest real estate company in the US and managing millions in revenue to now one of the most successful property managements in the US that is more passive and that is more a very strategic business where you are acquiring properties now, tell us about that transition and what was your toughest decision when you moved from one to another?
So that's a great question, Miguel. Thanks. So my old boss, Alex Perillo, used to say all the time, "You're an entrepreneur dressed as a CPA." And I love the entrepreneurial stance that most of our brokers at Realogy had or anywhere had. And I love the entrepreneurial play that we have here at Home River Group. So Home River Group's one of the largest, if not the largest, third-party property manager in the U.S. That means that we manage properties for you, not for us. And we do have a couple that we manage on our own, but the bulk of our book is managing units for retail investors like you, Miguel, myself, and a bunch of other people in the US. And we're in 30 states, 60 MSAs. We've grown very significantly over my tenure here, but it's a very different take from where I was at Realogy. Where at Realogy, we worked with brokers who worked with the home buyers. Here, we're working with the home buyers who's an investor in that home. So it's not like going buying, you know, 10 shares of anywhere or 10 shares of Nvidia or whatever. You're putting out 100, 200, $300,000 in cash and debt to go buy a home so somebody can rent that unit from you. So it becomes very personal at that point in time, right? And it's great to work much closer with those owners. It's also very different because it becomes a very personal thing because hey, this is my largest investment that I'm ever going to make. And it's like I said, it's not like buying shares of a stock. It's buying a massive asset and we've got to take care of it and have the same TLC that we do with your, like if we were managing your stocks as we're managing your home. That's why
Right.
our vision is homes you love, service you trust. And that's what we try to get through each and every day to our team and to our owners, right? Because if I can help you find a home to rent, we've got to provide that service that you love to really stay with us, whether you're a homeowner or a resident in one of our units. So we're a B2B, B2C type of company. We're very close to those owners who are entrepreneurs like you and I who really want to grow their own network. And there's a lot of challenges to it because when you're in 30 states, there's probably 50 different laws that we have to decide on by state, just from local Department of Real Estate guidelines. And you got to follow them and abide by them all the time. Otherwise, you wind up in a little hot water with the local real estate committees. But that's how I look at it: is we are there to support you as an owner. We are there to support you as a resident, and we want to help you as a resident go from one of our homes maybe at one Main Street to another one down at 7 Main Street or whatever it may be. And we want to help you as an owner look at your portfolio and say, hey, I bought this house, I had $1,000 of equity in it. I now have $100,000 of equity. How do we take that money and then turn around and reinvest it back into the business, their business, to help them grow their net worth? I had one guy tell me real quickly that I bought multifamily units for each of my child when they were both born. So he owns three bigger units, and all the income that comes off of that unit goes into their college fund down the road.
That's
And
great.
yes, you have to figure those things out, but as an owner, but that's a great way to go about it. And we're there to support them. We've got to make sure we rent those places timely. We've got to make sure that we've got great residents in there who respect the property and want to live there long term. And again, we've got to raise rents just because that's part of the business, right? I want
That's
to
a great.
supply great service to you as a resident or an owner, but I also got to take care of my employees who are my number one asset. Number two assets are our owners and number three are our residents, but my assets are my employees. And that's the hardest thing to really get people to understand is this all works together in an ecosystem and not just for HRG or not just for our private equity sponsors. It's for everyone so we can provide great service to you all day long.
Drew, how many employees do you have?
We have about 350 onshore and about 200 offshore.
And that's my, so I'm glad that you mentioned that. I know that you guys believe in global force, global talent. And tell us more about your vision. Where do you see not only the property management and real estate, but most industry going in regards to talent? Because we all talk about that. I mean, talent is not at a local basis anymore. I mean, now it's a global strategy for a lot of
Mhm.
companies. Tell us about that. How do you see it?
So that's another great question, Miguel. The way I look at it is I view what we're doing today onshore as super critical. We have to stay close to our customers, and our employees who are onshore are great at doing that. We have great property managers, we have great assistant property managers, we have onshore corporate folks, we have IT folks, et cetera, et cetera. And I think what's really important to think about that is you want to bring people who can grow through this process, right? I come in at a lower level. I can get up to a property manager or a regional manager or eventually a regional vice president or whatever. Not everybody's going to make it through that. Not everybody wants those things in life. It's really identifying those people who have the will and the want to get to those places in life. And that doesn't mean that we don't want people across the board in other positions. It just means some of the timing issues are going to change because Drew may just want to do X, Y, and Z for the rest of his career, and that's perfectly fine. And we want to see Drew grow his net worth, and we want to see those things happen over time. But we also have to be cognizant of we've got to continue to grow the entire workforce and be there from a business unit leader standpoint for if Miguel leaves, can Drew step into his shoes down the road? And we want to continue to build that type out. So it's really finding those people onshore who we can look at those things. Some of the things that we do offshore are much more mechanical in nature, much more repetitive in nature. And that's a different type of workforce, right? Not a lot of those people want to go up the next level. They're very happy doing what they're doing there. And there's some of these jobs, short term and long term, that move from overseas back onto seas, onshore, because you need a different skill set to really increase your customer retention, your owner retention, and really be a different voice for people. Hey, I live in the Oklahoma market, or I live in the Dallas market. Tell me a little bit about what's going on there. Tell me what's going on with rents. And you want to have that connection onshore with people. You can have it offshore too, but you want people in those markets who know what's going on and can really be a sounding board. Hey, is this the right place for me to rent, or is this the right place for me to buy as an owner? So that's kind of how I look at the onshore and offshore. But I think talent wise, it's been really hard the last 3 to 5 years to find the right talent. We've had a great HR team who's doing a wonderful job at that, but we continue to, it takes a lot longer to fill the jobs that used to fill very quickly.
Yeah, I was talking to a mutual friend that we have in regards to finding talent that is getting tougher and tougher, and the amount of the vacancy of talent is just growing in the last few years. So it's getting harder to find those talents in the U.S., and that's why more and more companies, not only large companies, medium-sized and smaller-sized companies are looking nearshore to expand their reach and hire. I mean, great talent. Sometimes we have the misunderstanding that you're not going to find great talent nearshore or offshore, and that's just something of the past. Because
Hmm.
obviously, you see companies like yours and many others that are just transforming their companies and finding great talent nearshore
We have
or
some
offshore.
great employees who work for
Yeah,
us from the Philippines, from India, from Bolivia, and a bunch of other companies around countries around the world. Those are the connections that when you bring those folks in, whether they're onshore folks or offshore folks, it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, Miguel. How do I help you achieve what you want to achieve as an
right.
individual, right? What are your goals? How do those goals work with our goals? And let's try to figure a way to help grow your career. And when you do those things, you're not just making a short term connection, you're making long term connections with people who they're going to call you down the road and say, hey, thank you for this, or I've got a question. Do you have a couple minutes for you? And when you respond yes to either one of those two things, it's a really good feeling deep down inside.
I did not know that you actually helping, that you were actually working directly with the property owners. I thought that you were more B2B. It's great to know that you're helping now any type of entrepreneur trying to create wealth and you manage that wealth. We're talking about obviously properties. Do you also do commercial or only residential, Andrew?
Today we're mostly single family residential. We do
Okay.
some build for rent communities, which are starting to become more of a fashion versus a fad. And we have multifamily units as well, which is starting to grow again as well. I think, thinking about it economically, there was a massive build of multifamily units over the last 5 or 6 years. And if you look in your town near Morristown, those aren't filling up as fast as they used to because whether the rents are too high or people don't want that type. So there's a give and take there. And I think some people are looking at this going, and a good friend of mine just moved um, from where I live out here in the sticks, as I call it, into Morristown by you, just because he wanted to be closer to town, and he went from owning to renting, and he's in his late 50s like myself, and
Yeah.
that it's a different demographic. It's really changing how people think about
Yes.
rental properties versus home ownership, and I don't think we're ever going to see what goes on in Germany with home ownership versus how we view homers ownership here. It is a dream for a lot of folks who have migrated to this country, who have looked to build that home. Whether it's, I know you've come to this country, my grandparents came to this country, where that was such a big part of their life is home ownership. Some of that is starting to change. I think it's a little bit generational. I also think it's a little bit of timing too.
Yeah.
And after you go through and you've got a house and you rebuild it from inside and out, like I've done here at my house, you sit back and go, man, that's a lot of work. I don't want to do that again. I'm going to go rent a house and somebody else do
Yeah.
that for me in the future.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're helping more entrepreneurs to become wealthy in this country. Let's talk about you and your experience. And when we go in the last 30, 40 years of working with Fortune 500 companies and having a tough job as a CFO and a COO, what has been the one time that you can remember that you had the toughest time, the toughest moments that you remember, and the toughest decision that you had to make at that time? Is there
Yeah.
one specific decision?
I'm going to break it into two, but they're kind of tied together. The first toughest thing for me was on 9/11. And one of my staff person, an intern, came up to me and said, Drew, my mom's on the street in New York City. A plane just flew into the World Trade Centers. And, we all know what happened the rest of that day. That was the toughest day for me, watching people react and trying to help them through some of the toughest moments in their life. Some people had relatives and friends in the building. Other people's were just distraught because of what was going on. That was probably the toughest day for me. That said, the second toughest day for me was the first time I ever had to go through a reduction in force and talk and tell people that I had to let them go. It was during the 2000 recession timeframe. That was the toughest thing for me to ever do. And talking to people who you know, who you love, who you appreciate, who have done great jobs for you, but our business has shrank dramatically and we just don't have space for everybody. That is a really, really hard thing to do. So, they're not connected because the second one happened before the first, but I take those things very personally. And people who know me on my team today know that if we have to go through a reduction in force, that I'm probably way more stressed on the inside than you see on the outside.
Yeah. Drew, I know that you're a family man and you have a beautiful family, beautiful wife and kids. But let's go back 30, 40 years and let's assume that you have in front of you to Andrew Napurano yourself. And with all of the experience that you have now, everything that you've been through, in regards to business, in regards to the future of that young Drew, what would you tell him?
Two things. One, spend a lot more time with your family. It is, unfortunately, I put work in front of family a couple times that I significantly regret. So if you have events that are there, work will be there tomorrow. As I said to one of my employees, saying, I've got all this work to do. I'm never going to get it done today. I'm going to be here till 10 or 11 o'clock at night. I go, you could be here till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning. The work's still going to be there. So you need to put pencils down and go spend time with your family. That resonates well with people. Is like it never work doesn't end, especially as you get up further in the ranks. So the first thing I would say is don't miss those events that are critical family events that you need to be there for. And the second one is learn and explore. Keep expanding your mind. Keep growing each and every day. You don't want to be, the old saying is if you're not growing, you're dying. And I would never say this in a bad way, but I spent 20 years at Realogy, which I would never change anything that happened. But in hindsight, I probably would have left 10 years earlier if I thought about where I wanted to be long term. Right. So, meaning 10 years at a place today is probably worth 20 or 30 years back when our parents were working. Right. So, you want to continue to learn, you want to continue to grow, you want to continue to see things and really help expand your own mind. And I think that's part of the only change I would ever say is 20 great years, probably should have done 10 and done a bunch of other things in the last 10 years.
Now, let's come back to today. What is the biggest moment of your life when we talk about business? But what is the biggest accomplishment? I know that you have many. I know it's hard to select one, but I'm giving you a few seconds to think about. I mean, obviously, I mean, running
Mm,
all the finances of a 500 company, a 500 fortune company, it's not easy. Not a lot of people can do that or talk about it. But what would be that moment or that time that you say, you know what, kudos for me, I did a great job. What is that time? What is that moment looks like?
yeah. So it wasn't a deal. It wasn't that we closed. That was great. It wasn't a promotion or anything along those lines. But one of the things I think often about was, especially when we're in offices all the time, Miguel, was that sit down in somebody's cube or somebody's office and just have a discussion about things. I was working with an IT leader, and the IT leader did not like what I had to say about his product. And I said, this is not a product that is going to be for the end user. This is a really good product from an IT view. And when I said that, I noticed that he got really upset about it. When the meeting was over, I couldn't catch up with him, but I finally sat down with him the next day. And I explained to him what I want him to do and what I want him to build and how I want that to be not just a great IT product, because I know you can build that, but a great product for the end user, for our brokers, for our agents, etc. And we sat down and we had a long conversation about it. And I said, well, if you were that person, where would you go? What would you think this looked like from your perspective? And he paused and he said, that's a really good question. He said, why don't we go get somebody, the voice of the customer, see what they want, and have a conversation after that about where the product is and where we have to go. And he did those things, and the product was great. He did a wonderful job building this product. Many kudos went to him, not to me, and that's where they should go to him because he built it. He took what I said to heart, he built it out, he built a great product. When I was leaving my last company, Realogy, he came up to me and sat down and basically said, I'm very sad that you're leaving. You helped me tremendously understand what I needed to build, and I wouldn't have been able to have done that without your mentorship. So I keep that near and dear to my heart when I'm thinking about what we do. And promotions are great, titles are great, monies and bonuses, blah, blah, blah. Like I said, that's what we do. That's how we get paid. It's the other
Yeah.
things that are really important to me from a personal standpoint that I can help people grow.
Right. I think people sometimes don't realize how much influence they have with others, especially when you are in a position like yourself.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't say anything, but I'm pretty sure that you have been a great influence in a very good way to a lot of people in the industry. And sometimes they don't say it, but I mean, we all know what you've done for the industry. Sometimes the people that are on the front are not always the people doing the bad job in the back to keep the company afloat.
Mhm.
And that's what people like yourself do. I mean, not only keeping the company afloat, but making sure that the company is making money and managing the right people and creating the right expectations. And that's why you are an icon in this industry, real estate, property management. I appreciate everything that you've done.
Miguel, thank you so much. I really appreciate spending time with you, whether it's on a podcast or just sitting back having a conversation. We'll have to do that part of that soon before the holidays come up here. But thank you for everything. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your friendship. You know, our relationship goes back a long way. It goes back through Tanya and David Acosta and all the friends that we know together. So just thank you so much for everything you've done.
Andrew, it's a pleasure. With this, we're going to end our show. The People Matter show is all about leaders that are influencers, that are people that are transforming industries. And I appreciate Drew for your time today. And we'll see you in the next time. Um,